I started working night shifts at the old hospital a few months ago. I thought it would be an easy way to make some extra cash during winter. I've done healthcare for years, so I figured I could handle it. But I wasn't prepared for how lonely it would feel. It was just me, the patients, and the long, creaking hallways. I remembered the ghost stories I'd heard before starting. They made my skin crawl. I thought it was all nonsense. I was wrong. At first, the night shifts were quiet. I walked the same halls, checked on patients, and organized supplies. It felt routine. Then, on my first night, something odd happened. A chill rushed through the hallway while I was in the supply room. I thought it was just a draft. That's when I heard a faint humming sound from the next room. I checked, but there shouldn't have been any patients there. A shiver ran down my spine. I told myself it was just my tired mind playing tricks. Weeks passed, and I noticed even weirder things. Supplies would go missing. I'd look for gauze or a syringe, only to find them in strange places. One night, the patient monitors flickered. They showed static instead of readings. My heart raced. I thought about the previous nights when I focused on my work, to ignore the heaviness in the air. Then my phone started buzzing at odd hours. I got messages that said things like, "I can hear you," or "You're not alone." At first, I thought maybe it was a prank, but the messages kept coming. Each one tightened the knot in my stomach. Was my exhaustion messing with me, or was something truly trying to communicate? One shift, I walked past the main nurses' station. The lights flickered. The air felt colder. I paused, sensing something. Before I could leave, I heard a whisper. I couldn't understand the words, but it sent chills through me. I looked around, but the hallway was empty. My heart raced. I wanted to convince myself it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling the hospital wasn't empty. A small part of me wanted to run, but I stayed for my patients. I questioned what was real. The nights blurred together, each one feeling more unsettling than the last. I told myself I was strong, but I felt weak. I didn't know who to talk to. Then one night, while checking on a patient, I saw something in the corner of the room. It looked like a figure. I froze. It felt as if my heart stopped. Then it disappeared. Panic rose in me. I wanted to call for help, but the silence was heavy. I turned on the light, but the room was empty. Maybe I was just imagining things. I wasn't sure. The hospital felt different now. The walls seemed to close in. My shifts grew longer and darker. Whatever I saw that night haunted me. I wanted to leave, but I felt trapped, alone in the chilling quiet. Each night, I could hear the whispers again, and each time they seemed to get closer. I arrived for my shift, dragging my feet through the entrance. The air inside felt heavier than usual. I glanced at the clock. It was just past midnight. The familiar sight of the empty lobby sent a shiver through me. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I had a job to do. After checking in at the nurses' station, I headed down the main corridor. My first stop was room 203. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I turned to look back, but nothing was there. Just shadows bouncing against the walls. Still, the nagging sensation gnawed at me. Room 203 had a patient who'd been there for weeks. I was used to his soft murmurs in the night. As I entered, I noticed the bed was empty. My heart sank. Panic spread when I realized there was no way he could have moved on his own. I scanned the room, my pulse quickening. The bathroom door was ajar. I stepped closer, calling his name softly. That's when I heard it, a clattering sound from the hallway. I hesitated, trying to convince myself it was just a cart bumping against the wall. But when I looked, the hall was empty. I took my phone out, glancing at the time. It was 12:15 a.m. I gripped the edge of the doorframe, torn between checking the hallway and ensuring the patient was safe. I pushed the bathroom door open and called out again. Silence answered back. That's when I decided I needed help. I pulled my phone out to text the head nurse, but my fingers froze. My screen lit up, another message. "I see you. The color drained from my face. I turned quickly, eager to run out of the room. I took another deep breath. I couldn't show fear. Not here. Not now. When I stepped into the hallway, I had to search every direction, but there was nothing. No one. Just the flickering lights and the echo of my own breath. I tried to shake off the dread creeping into my mind. I composed myself and moved to check on the supply room, needing to distract myself from the pulse of anxiety. But as I walked, I thought I heard a soft voice call my name. "Help me." It sounded so clear yet distant. I stopped, letting it settle in. Maybe it was a trick of the mind, or was someone really in trouble? I quickened my pace, wanting to find the source. I was ready to turn the corner when I spotted something strange. A shadow flitted across the wall. My heart hammered. I couldn't just stand there. I moved closer, but the moment I did, the shadow vanished. My thoughts raced. I had to find out what was happening. I pushed through the supply room door, scanning for anything out of place. Then I remembered. There had been a third message, one I hadn't opened. I quickly pulled it up. "You shouldn't be here." I felt the air turn cold again, more intense this time. My breath hitched in my throat, and I immediately pressed my back against the wall, feeling the chill seep into my bones. Then the lights began to flicker, and I heard the whispers again, menacing and confused. They seemed angry now. Desperate, I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the empty space. My heart raced. Whatever was happening was growing darker, and I was standing right in the middle of it. As my thoughts spiraled, the whispers fell silent. Suddenly a loud crash rattled the shelves nearby, startling me and sending my heart racing even faster. That was when I heard another voice, closer this time, as though it were right behind me. "You're not alone." The unmistakable urgency gripped me, and I knew I had to figure out how to escape before it was too late. I charged toward the supply room door, feeling the fear clawing at my chest. I yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me. The voice was right. It was as if something was standing behind me, waiting, breathing. I turned slowly, my eyes darting around the dim light. Nothing was there, but the shadows felt thicker, darker. I stepped back, pressing against the wall. The whispers had returned, swirling around me like a gust of wind, unintelligible, but palpable. My heart raced. I had to break free. I took a deep breath, mustering all my strength. I slammed my body against the door, rattling it. It didn't give, but I felt a tremor beneath my hands, as if something was trying to break through from the other side. Then I heard it again. "Help me." The voice was clearer now. It echoed from down the corridor, coming from the direction of the nurse's station. I hesitated, but fear of being trapped nudged me forward. I released the door with a desperate shove, hope flaring inside me. If I could make it to the station, maybe someone else was still there. Just as I sprinted down the hall, something groaned above me. I glanced up. The ceiling lights flickered violently, like they were about to fail entirely. "Just get to the station," I muttered to myself, pushing the dread aside. I turned left at the junction, the whispers now pulsing around me. I felt a chill in the air, something cold wrapping around my shoulders. As I approached the nurse's station, I searched for any sign of life. The area was utterly dark, only the emergency exit sign casting a weak glow. My pulse quickened again, and dread tightened its grip. I could see the outline of a figure leaning in a chair. Relief washed over me until I realized there was no movement. I tiptoed closer, straining to see. The figure was slumped forward, hair falling across their face. I reached out, nerve-wracking uncertainty clinging to every step. "Are you okay?" I whispered. When there was no response, I reached down and gently touched their shoulder. They didn't move. A surge of terror gripped me. I knew their face. It was Karen, the night nurse. I felt for a pulse. Nothing. I pulled back, breathless. I needed to get help, but the strange atmosphere was closing in on me. The whispers spun into frantic voices, and I couldn't make out the words. I turned away from Karen, needing to leave action behind and escape. But then I noticed it. On the desk, a small piece of paper was half hidden beneath a stack of files. It read, "They're waiting." My body went cold, the moment stretching as I processed the message. Who was waiting? And for what? Before I could react, a loud crash rang behind me. I spun around to find the front door of the lobby swinging open and shut. Each bang echoed like a warning. Someone, or something, was out there. I had to leave, fast. As I turned to exit the station, the cold air whipped around me, and the whispers intensified, the shadows closing in. I bolted down the corridor, fear electrifying my every sense. My head spun, and as I reached the lobby, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me once more. I squinted into the darkness, searching, terrified. That's when I saw it standing just outside the lobby, an outline dark and menacing, with a broken smile that sent waves of terror through me. Right then I understood I wasn't alone, not anymore. I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the floor as the figure loomed. The broken smile twisted into something sinister, and I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Instead I turned and fled. The darkness behind me surged forward, and the whispers erupted into a cacophony. I dashed back into the corridor, the wild beating of my heart drowning out everything. I needed to find an escape route. As I ran, I heard the shuffling behind me. Someone was coming. I risked a glance over my shoulder, but the figure was gone. Just like that. My breath caught in my throat. "Where are you?" I muttered under my breath, trying to steady myself. The oppressive air clung heavy, but I had to keep moving. I couldn't stay in the lobby. I sprinted toward the stairwell, hoping to find another exit. The emergency stairs were always locked, but maybe the pressure of panic would work in my favor. I shoved the door open and stumbled into the stairwell. The dim bulb flickered above me, barely illuminating the steps ahead. I took them two at a time, adrenaline surging as each footfall echoed around the small space. I reached the first landing but paused. I expected to hear that eerie whisper again, but instead the silence felt suffocating. My mind raced through options. If I could make it to the roof, I could find a way down. I pushed upward, anxiety driving me further into the unknown. Each step felt like a countdown, the whole building creaking as if it were alive, pursuing me. I finally reached the rooftop door and threw it open. Cool air flooded in, relieving the tension in my chest. The moon hung in the sky, a sliver of silver light casting shadows across the rooftop. But there was no safety here either. The vast emptiness of the night made me feel small, exposed. I dashed across the roof, searching for any sign of hope, any way down. Then I noticed something glinting on the ground near the edge. Curious, I approached, heart still hammering. As I bent down, panic washed over me again. It was a small ID badge, Karen's badge. But how? I felt the world shrink around me as I clutched it tight, my instincts yelling at me to leave. Suddenly a loud bang echoed from behind. The rooftop door slammed shut. I whipped around, my heart racing, and watched as shadows flickered around the perimeter. "No!" I shouted, scrambling toward the door. I rattled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. Then it hit me. The voice from moments before. "They're waiting! Waiting for me! Waiting for Karen!" I stumbled backward, bumping against the edge. Fear swept through me, and I suddenly wished I could rewind, go back to when I first entered this hellish place. It was then I realized the whispers had transformed into laughter, sharp, taunting. I turned to face the source of the sound, but the roof remained empty, an arena for whatever torment awaited me. As I stood there, I felt a creeping dread. I'd have to confront whatever was behind the dark outline, but was I ready? Just then, the laughter stopped, and a new voice cut through the silence. "You shouldn't have come here." I felt my knees tremble. I was out of options, and the shadows were closing in again. I couldn't think. The weight of dread pressed down on me as the shadows shifted closer. "What do you want?" I shouted, but my voice felt lost in the chill of the night. I could hear my breath coming in sharp gasps, the adrenaline coursing through me like lightning, making me feel alive, yet terrified. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted movement. A dark figure was merging with the shadows near the edge of the roof. It was hard to tell if it was real or a trick of the light, but I had no time for uncertainty. My instincts screamed at me to run, to jump off the edge if I had to. I quickly scanned the roof for anything I could use. There it was. A fire escape ladder, slightly obscured by shadows. I darted toward it, feeling both exhilarated and foolish. If I could just get down to the street, I could find help. I climbed up and grasped the cold metal, but just as I began to lower myself, a hand gripped my shoulder. I gasped and whirled around. The figure from before was closer now. The face was obscured by the darkness, but I could see its eyes, glowing like embers in the night. "You shouldn't have come here," it repeated, voice low and mocking. "Let me go," I cried, shaking off its grip. My heart raced as I backed away again, the sound of my own pulse deafening. I felt dizzy with fear as I stumbled. Just as I thought it couldn't get worse, the rooftop door banged open again. More figures poured out into the moonlight. There were so many, all emanating an eerie stillness. Panic surged through me, and I shot past the first figure, making for the edge of the roof. I had to try. I couldn't stay here. But they were blocking my path. Their laughter rose again, chilling and mocking, echoing off the walls of the roof. I was slipping into desperation. "Help!" I shouted, but it barely left my lips. I turned, looking for anything, any way out. That's when I saw it. A small maintenance door wedged open. A breath of hope flickered inside me. I sprinted toward it, every muscle screaming in protest. One of the shadows lunged for me, but I ducked and dove through the door, slamming it shut behind me. Inside the stairwell, the air was stale and heavy. I leaned against the door, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. I could still hear their laughter faintly, like a distant haunting tune. I was still trapped, but at least I had a moment's reprieve. As I took a shaky step back, I glanced around, searching for another way down. The dim light revealed a narrow hallway. I moved cautiously, almost expecting the shadows to reappear at any moment. Then I saw the flicker of light at the end of the hall. That flicker took me by surprise. It felt too welcoming in this nightmare. I had to know what it was. Steeling myself, I crept toward it. But the closer I got, the more uncertain I became. What lurked beyond that light? Before I could take another step, a loud crash echoed behind me. Shouts followed, angry and frantic. They were looking for me. My heart sank. There was no safety. Whatever those shadows were, they weren't going to let me leave easily. I needed a plan, but as I moved deeper into the hallway, I felt the shadows creeping in from behind. I had to decide, and quickly. I pivoted sharply, heart racing with the sound of footsteps echoing through the stairwell. The flickering light ahead seemed less inviting and more like a dangerous lure, but I had no time to hesitate. I chose to trust my instincts, albeit cautiously. I bolted down the narrow hallway, my rubber soles squeaking on the grimy floor. Every shadow seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and I fought the urge to look behind me. I could sense them closing in, their presence tangible in the frigid air. As I reached the end of the hallway, I threw myself against a metal door. It felt locked, but I twisted the knob desperately. It clicked open, and I tumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me. I landed in a small, dimly lit room. A single flickering fluorescent bulb hung overhead, bathing everything in an unsettling pallor. The walls were drab and peeling, but I spotted something that made my pulse quicken. A desk piled high with papers and an old computer, its screen crackling to life. I rushed to the desk, scanning the papers frantically. They were filled with scribbled notes and sketches, dark, distorted images that set my teeth on edge. I couldn't decipher the meaning, but one phrase caught my eye. "The Watchers are always waiting." I felt a chill race down my spine. My breathing quickened, but I forced myself to study the rest of the room. There was a dusty window, but it was barred shut. No escape. I glanced back toward the door. Surely they would find me soon. I had to hide or think of a way out. As if that thought had summoned them, I heard the door rattling. Panic surged. I scanned the room for a place to hide, but found nothing. Just as I was about to retreat behind the desk, I noticed a small hole in the wall, perhaps once a ventilation shaft. It was a tight fit. I hesitated for a moment, then squeezed through, scraping my arms against the rough metal edges. My heart pounded louder in my ears as the darkness closed in around me. It felt like I was crawling forever. The tunnel was narrow and claustrophobic, yet I heard muffled voices above me. They were searching, calling out to one another in grim tones. My heart dropped further. They were close. The dark tunnel twisted and turned until I saw a faint light ahead. I pushed harder, desperation fueling my movement. Bursting through the shaft, I landed in another small room. But this one was different. Instead of being filled with dust and decay, it was eerily pristine. It felt wrong. Before I could process my surroundings, my heart dropped once more. Tacked to the walls were photographs, snapshots of people with terrified expressions, each one more unsettling than the last. I recognized their faces from the newspaper clippings I'd seen earlier. I felt a pair of eyes on me. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach, and then I saw her, a girl, alive yet eerily still, crouched in the corner, her gaze locked on me. She didn't make a sound. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. It wasn't just the shadows I had escaped. Something much worse awaited. The door behind me creaked open. Whatever was hunting me was now in the room. I froze, heart racing. I needed to move, but the realization hit me hard. I had stumbled right into the heart of the nightmare. I felt like the room itself was holding its breath. The girl in the corner remained motionless, her eyes wide and filled with a mixture of fear and something else. Recognition, perhaps. I could almost hear my heart pounding as I strained to listen for any sign of movement behind me. The door creaked wider, and I caught the shadow of a figure entering the room. It was just a glimpse, but it was enough to send a jolt of terror through my veins. I glanced at the girl again, hoping for some sign that she had a plan, but her face remained eerily blank, as if she had already accepted her fate. I had to act. I dropped to the floor and crawled toward a stack of boxes in the corner, my instincts screaming at me to hide. The muffled voices still echoed from the room behind, like dark whispers that sent chills down my spine. I pushed myself against the wall, trying to blend into the shadows as best as I could. The figure stepped fully into the room, and I held my breath. It was a man dressed in dark clothing and staring at the wall covered with photographs. His expression was unreadable, but he seemed focused, almost reverent. I wanted to scream at him to leave, to save us, but I knew that would only draw attention. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the girl inch closer to the floor, her movements robotic. She couldn't be thinking of doing something reckless, could she? A surge of fear rushed through me, urging me to stop her, but I felt paralyzed. Then she whispered, her voice barely audible, "They watch you. You can't escape." My blood ran cold. I didn't know if she meant the man or something else entirely. Before I could respond or figure out what to do, the man turned abruptly. He was looking straight at me. Panic flooded my senses, urging me to flee. But where could I go? I was trapped like a rat in a corner, with the only way out being the door now inches away from him. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice calm but ominous. He took a step toward my hiding spot, and I barely dared to breathe. I felt the girl beside me tense, her gaze darting between me and the man. If I watched him, would he be distracted long enough for me to slip away? Or would he lunge at me the moment I made a sound? Thinking quickly, I glanced at the boxes beside me. There was a rustling noise, a sound that could mask any movement I made. I couldn't linger in this moment of indecision much longer. The urge to confront the unknown pressed heavily against my chest. I took a deep breath and grabbed a small, loose item from the boxes. I hurled it at the wall opposite to me. The clatter echoed through the room, creating a sharp distraction. He turned away, drawn by the noise, and instinct kicked in. I scrambled from my hiding place and surged toward the door, praying I would make it before he noticed. As I burst through the door, I glanced back one final time. I could see the flicker of surprise and anger cross his face, but it didn't matter. I had to run, and then everything went dark. The lights flickered once more, plunging me into a sudden silence that wrapped around me like a shroud. My heart raced as I faced the unseen threat, unsure of what lay ahead or behind. I stumbled forward into the darkness, adrenaline propelling me as I fumbled to regain my bearings. The air was thick around me, heavy with anticipation, and I strained to listen for any signs of movement. My mind raced, desperately trying to make sense of where I was. I took a shaky breath, my eyes adjusting to the shadowy surroundings. I could barely make out the outlines of what seemed like a long corridor. To my left, something glimmered faintly. Was it a reflection of light or just my imagination? Either way, I didn't want to linger. I decided to move right. As I crept down the corridor, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The silence was almost suffocating, but then I heard it, a whisper that echoed off the walls, so faint I wasn't sure if it was real or just my fear playing tricks on me. "Help me," it urged, a haunting plea that sent chills racing down my spine. I stopped short, glancing back the way I had come, but there was nothing behind me. My instincts told me to keep moving, but curiosity gnawed at my mind. Who was that? Was someone else trapped here like me? I took a cautious step toward the sound, the whisper fading into an unsettling silence as I approached. I pressed on, the darkness feeling thicker now, wrapping around me like an unwelcome cloak. That's when I saw it. A flickering light ahead, bright and unnaturally inviting. I moved toward it, careful not to make a sound. As I got closer, I noticed that the light was coming from a room at the end of the corridor. The door was slightly ajar, and the light flickered like a candle. I reached for the handle, hesitating at the last moment. What if it was a trap? But the urge to find out what was inside surged within me. I pushed the door open slowly, cringing as it creaked on its hinges. My breath caught as I peered inside. The room was filled with old medical equipment, dust covering everything. But what caught my attention was the large, empty bed in the center, covered with a faded sheet. The flickering light cast eerie shadows on the walls. I felt a shiver run through me. It was wrong. Something was off. Then I noticed a figure standing in the corner, which hadn't been there a moment before. My heart dropped. I couldn't make out its face, but the silhouette was unmistakable. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I found myself frozen, caught in the gaze of whatever horror awaited me. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure tilted its head, and I saw the flicker of something. Was it recognition? But before I could react, the figure stepped forward, revealing a face hidden in shadows. I couldn't see clearly, but I could sense a sinister intent behind those eyes. And then, in a low, chilling voice, it said, "You shouldn't have come here." Before I could respond, the lights went out completely, plunging everything into darkness once again. My heart pounded as I felt myself slipping into a state of panic. Where was the door? How had I gotten in here? Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps approaching. My pulse quickened. I needed to escape, but in that suffocating darkness, all hope seemed lost. I whipped around, desperate to find the door, but the thick blackness swallowed all sense of direction. My hands reached out, grazing the cold walls as I struggled to maintain my composure. The footsteps got closer, sharp and deliberate, echoing in the silence like a cruel heartbeat. I felt trapped, like a mouse in a maze, cornered and exposed. Without thinking, I dashed toward where I hoped the door could be. I desperately shoved against the wall, feeling for any opening. Instead, I collided with the bed. The thin, faded sheet brushed my arm, sending a jolt of revulsion through me. My lungs felt tight, and I fought against the rising panic. Then the footsteps stopped. An oppressive silence filled the room, broken only by my ragged breathing. I couldn't tell if the figure had followed me or if it had vanished into the shadows. My instincts screamed to get out, and I fumbled along the side of the bed, my fingers trembling as they brushed against something cold and metallic. It was a scalpel, glinting in the dim glow from somewhere outside the room. Gripping it tightly, I forced myself to keep calm. If it came to it, I wouldn't go down without a fight. I'd never fought anyone in my life, but the fear of the unknown kept my adrenaline surging. I took a deep breath and steadied myself. "Who's there?" I called, trying to sound braver than I felt. The only reply was the silence, heavy and thick. Then, through the stillness, came a voice, not the chilling, accusatory voice from before, but a new one, softer and tremulous. "Please, help me." My heart sank. Was this a trap, a cruel game? Thinking of the earlier whispered plea, I hesitated. "Where are you?" I asked, searching the darkness around me. "Over here," the voice said, closer now, but still out of sight. It sounded desperate, almost pleading. "In the corner. Please, I need your help." Against my better judgment, I crept forward. The scalpel clutched tightly in my hand. With each step, I felt the air thicken, almost electric. Just then, a dim light flickered back to life, illuminating the corner of the room. The figure lay slumped against the wall. A young woman, her face streaked with dirt and tears. "Thank God," she whispered as I approached. "I thought I was alone." I dropped to my knees beside her, unsure of whether to comfort her or continue being on guard. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "No time to explain." She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "We need to go. It's coming. It knows you're here." My blood ran cold. I felt every instinct scream at me to run, but I also wanted to believe her. I glanced back toward the bed, my mind racing. "What do you mean?" Her eyes widened in fear. "If we don't move, we won't ever leave." Before I could respond, the oppressive silence shifted, replaced with a low, rumbling growl that seemed to originate from the very walls around us. "We have to go! Now!" she shouted, yanking me forward as I stumbled to my feet. In that instant, all thoughts of caution fled. Something primal inside me took over, fight or flight. We burst from the dim light of the room, heading blindly into the corridor beyond, leaving uncertainty and fear behind. But as I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was closing in on us, ready to swallow us whole. I sprinted through the hallway, the girl's grasp tight around my wrist as we tore away from the ominous growl that echoed behind us. The dim corridor seemed endless, shadows stretching and twisting into ominous forms that danced at the periphery of my vision. I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder. The darkness seemed to pulse, as if eager to reach us. "Faster!" she shouted, pulling me forward. We turned a corner, and the flickering lights overhead flickered as if they were alive, each burst reminding me of my fleeting hope of escape. I could hear the low rumble getting closer, thrumming through the walls like an angry heartbeat. Panic surged anew within me, but I pushed the fear down. Whatever waited behind us was larger than life itself, something that had been lurking in these halls for ages. The girl tugged me into an adjoining room, crammed with medical devices that seemed out of a horror movie. It felt wrong to be there. Something ancient lingered in the air, as if the machines bore witness to countless stories of suffering. "In here," she urged. Without hesitation, I stepped inside, but as the door swung closed behind us, I felt the shadows creeping closer, curling beneath the crack. "Do you know where we are?" I asked, gasping for breath as I leaned against the door. "What did you mean, it knows you're here?" She shook her head, her eyes darting toward the door. It doesn't matter. We can't let it find us. We need to leave." Her voice trembled despite her urgency, each breath short and panicked. "What do you think that thing is?" I pressed, struggling to quell my rising dread. She looked me straight in the eye, her expression piercing. "I've seen it. It's not just a ghost, it's something more. It hunts those who come here." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Those who should not have come." The growl outside morphed into a cacophony of whispers, echoing as if it were trying to claw its way through the walls, each voice loaded with malice. I could hardly focus on her words, the fear flooding my veins and overwhelming any rational thought. "We have to watch for an exit," she said, looking around the room frantically. "I've been here too long. I thought I was safe, but—" A loud bang reverberated against the door, as if something heavy collided with it. I stumbled back, my heart racing. "What was that?" The girl's eyes widened. "It's trying to get in. We have to find a way out." Instincts took over as I glanced around the room. My eyes fell on a narrow window, dust creeping into the edges. "We can fit through there," I shouted, pointing. Her gaze flicked to the other side of the room, and we moved quickly, each step silent against the grime-covered floor. As we edged toward the window, another crash shook the door, more confident this time. My breath quickened even further, and I pushed myself against the wall, heart racing in rhythm with the onslaught outside. "Now!" I shouted as I reached the window, pushing it open. The cool night air filled the room, refreshing yet foreboding. "You first!" She slid through effortlessly, but just then the door splintered under the weight of whatever was outside. I felt a primal fear clawing at my chest, and a look of panic flickered across her face. The sound of shattering wood sent me reeling. "Hurry!" I gasped. Just as I squeezed through, I felt a rush of cold air behind me, the darkness spilling into the room. I fell onto the ground outside, the gritty surface beneath my fingers grounding me as I scrambled to my feet. I turned back to see what remained of the doorway, a figure emerging from the shadows, eyes glowing like crimson embers. "Go!" I urged her, pulling on her arm as I surveyed the area. We were out, almost but far from free. The hospital loomed behind us, the darkness spilling out like tendrils, enticingly malignant. "Where do we go?" she yelled, glancing back as the figure stepped fully into the moonlight, its form elongated and twisting, dimensions far too monstrous to comprehend. Panic surged through me. "Keep running!" I shouted, sprinting toward the parking lot, the chill of the night stinging my face. We dashed between parked cars, the low growl, now a laugh, echoing behind us, chilling my very soul. Just when I thought nothing could get worse, I heard the crash of metal and realized the entity had freed itself from the confines of the hospital's walls. I didn't stop to process how close it was now. We reached the end of the lot, but all I could see ahead was the road splintering into two. There were no streetlights, only the sharp talons of darkness stretching from the hospital, eager to reclaim us. "Which way?" she gasped, adrenaline surging. "Left!" I shouted, praying it was the right choice. We took off again as the figure lurked behind, shadows writhing like an angry serpent. Just when I thought we'd outrun it, an echoing roar sliced through the air, and I could almost feel the heat of its breath on my back. I could see a glimpse of headlights in the distance. Cars were stopping near the intersection. "Keep going." As we dashed toward the road, I heard the girl cry out suddenly, stumbling in response to an unseen force pulling her back. I turned just in time to see the shadows engulfing her, tendrils of darkness wrapping around her legs as she struggled. "No! Don't let it take you!" I shouted desperately, reaching out for her. "Help me!" she yelled, her voice filled with panic. My heart tore as I felt the weight of choices I had made. Was this my fault? Could I save her? But I hesitated, and the darkness swallowed her whole. With my heart plummeting into despair, I sprinted toward the gathering headlights, my only hope. As I crossed the threshold, I felt the tension of the shadows recede, if only momentarily. I didn't look back. Whatever lingered in the corridors behind me was out of my reach, and I clung to the hope that maybe someone else would find her. Maybe she would be all right. Or maybe she wouldn't. I reached a police car, panting heavily, and banged on the door. The officer stepped out, concern flooding his face as he caught sight of my dishevelled appearance. "What happened?" he asked, his voice thick with authority. I opened my mouth to explain, but before I could speak, the figure stepped out from the shadows behind the hospital. Panic washed over me. I knew it was searching for me just as much as I had tried to escape. It was only a few yards away now, the scene unfolding like an unseen nightmare. I looked up at the officer, and before I could utter a sound, the creature was gone, absorbed into nothingness. Was it real, or had my mind finally snapped? The incident, a nightmare, swirled in the endless recesses of my thoughts as I stood there in silence, still haunted by the shadows that lingered close. I would never know what truly dwelt within that cursed place, and I silently vowed never to return to that haunting hospital again. Even now, I wonder if the shadows are still waiting for someone else. And that thought unsettles me more than anything else.